well, truth to speak, I wanted to discuss this topic in my previous The Two Ashes of Araindel lore video, but the video was already long enough, so I thought that if I include too many different subjects, some interesting stuff might end up being lost among the other interesting things, and it would be better to discuss some topics separately. So, Gael is a slave knight, whose purpose seems to be to enable the painter to create a new painted world instead of the rotting world of Araindel. It is a speculation, but I'd say that it seems that it's not like he simply serves the painter, though he refers to her as his lady.
My lady lives in the cold land of Araindel.
But rather that he actually has some interest of his own in creating a new painted world, and might be actually playing a way more important role behind the scenes of the events we're drawn into, than it might appear at the first look. Regarding Gael's appearance, he has a rather long grey beard and a deeply scarred face with white, apparently blinded eyes. Which is no wonder, given his occupation. As we know, the slave knights were undead used as fodder in bloody wars time and time again, and they eventually lost their minds in endless violent battles, but even then they were not relieved from the duty. And as we speculated in previous videos, it is even possible that it's exactly how the Madman Maker's Covenant appeared. As the slave knight gear seems to be reminiscent of the armor used by a Mad Holy Knight Hordrick, but that's a speculation really. What is a little weird about his appearance, however, is that while his face is scarred, the other parts of his body that we unfortunately get to see seem to be more or less okay. But I guess that's more like a technical thing about the textures on the body of his character. So let's return to the serious topics. As for Gael's name, there are some really intriguing options regarding its possible meanings, so let us now discuss them. The first idea we get, I guess, is that it might mean Gael as in Gaels, Celtic ethno-linguistic group. Word Gael is actually used as a word for Irish person, or also a Highlander in Scotland, and, basically the Scottish Gaelic language we've mentioned quite a few times in my etymology videos, is named after the Gaels, people who speak it. But originally word Gael is derived from Proto-Celtic Wegus, wild, via Proto-Brittonic Gaedalo of the same meaning, and was used in meanings of wild man, forest man, and later also in the meaning of warrior. And warrior meaning would actually fit Gael, as he's a slave knight, a restless warrior who's been thrown into the bleakest of battles. However, there is another possible meaning of his name, a color. Yellow, as of Dutch Low Saxon word Gael derived from Proto-Germanic Gulwas, originating from Gel, to shine, meaning yellow. Actually the English word yellow we've just used is itself derived from the very same Proto-Germanic root, so name Gael, in the meaning of yellow, might be possibly referring to the color of Gael's armor, which has hues similar to that of the sunset armor of the Sunless Realms. And the root Gel, meaning to shine, might also be possibly related to a word Gael present in Elvish languages created by J.R.R. Tolkien. As Tolkien's Elvish Gael has meanings of glimmering, glittering or pale, but these meanings don't seem to fit our Gael of Ashes of Araindel DLC. However, name Gael might also be related to the Old Irish word Gael, from Proto-Celtic Gaelo meaning relative, kin, or also relationship, kinship. And, well, we hear the painter refer to Gael as uncle.
I wonder if Uncle Gael has found it.
But I guess it's somewhat hard to say for sure that he's her actual uncle, as it looks like in this case it might be used not in the sense of a relative, uncle, but be simply a word the painter, who despite her age, remains rather young and somewhat childish both inside and outside, uses to refer to adult Gael, especially since she has red yellow eyes and very interestingly looking skin, which probably makes her rather different from ordinary humans. And Gael might be also an alternative form of Welsh verbal meaning to get, to receive. But I guess that wouldn't make that much sense in this case, though. It could somehow be related to the fact that Gael seeks for the things that are necessary for the painter to create a new world. However, the most intriguing option is that Gael might actually be a form of another name, Gwynael. A name which we actually discussed back in the very first Behind the Souls Names video, where we mentioned it as one of possible names of the Nameless King, as all of Gwyn's children seemed to have the Gwyn root in their names. So, Gwynael is a name composed from the Welsh elements Gwyn, white, holy, blessed and meaning generous. And isn't it really intriguing, as Gwynael could really be a name of some of Gwyn's children, or at least be simply referring to Gwyn himself. And, well, it gets even more interesting as Gael actually has this unusually long beard, which is somewhat reminiscent of Gwyn's. and such beard is actually unique for a human character. I mean such as players, human NPCs who can equip different gear and such, as the longest beard we can get in character creation is only this long. And Gael is also related to the Painted World, and Yorshka, who's considered to be Gwendolyn's sister, seems to be, at least indirectly, related to the Painted World too. But, let's not get too excited about it, as Gael actually has human appearance and size, prays to a goddess and actually is called a slave knight. And, although the slave knight gear description says that in the past only the undead, thus humans, served as the slave knights, which might be interpreted as a hint that nowadays not all slave knights are actually undead, Gael rather seems to be a human, after all. But, that doesn't really mean that if he's not a deity the name Gael wouldn't fit him. The thing is that during the boss fight against the Sister Freed, we can see Gael use a miracle first introduced in the Ashes of Araindel DLC. Way of White Corona, or I believe it's simply ring circle in Japanese, rather than corona. The miracle itself is very interesting, as in its description it is said that, long ago, when the imprints left by the gods were still deep, miracles of the Way of White existed alongside Orioles. Those who yearned for the long-lost Orioles fully believed that they would return, one day. And, to me, it was rather cool to find this stuff actually, as I believe the Orioles mentioned there are in fact the so-called resonance rings, similar to the circlet of the Way of White, that in Dark Souls 1 appeared in other players' world at the spot where some player had used a miracle in his or her world. A miracle cast in vicinity of such rings received a synergy boost. And it actually makes me wonder whether is the last part of the miracle's description about those who yearned for the long-lost Orioles referring to players who missed the resonance rings of Dark Souls 1. And recalling how the meaning of Gwyn's name, White, Blessed, Holy, could actually inspire the Way of White's name, which in such case could also be Way of Blessed, Way of Holy. Could the name Gwynael, White, Holy, Blessed, Generous be related to the use of this miracle? Of course. Such question is posed only under assumption that name Gael is actually used as a shortened form of Gwynael. Another peculiar thing is that name Gwendolyn actually means White, Blessed Ring, which kinda can be compared to the Japanese name of the miracle, Way of White Ring. Though, as it's not related to the moon powers, I'd say it's a coincidence. What is definite though, is that Gael is actually a very peculiar, mysterious character who likely is far not as simple as he might appear at the first look. And, as he's actually immortal, if you kill him he simply reappears at the same spot, and the painter says that Gael seeks a pigment, the dark soul of man, for her to create a new painting. Could it be that we'll meet him in the next DLC where we'll maybe find that pigment? Maybe we'll get to know a little more about him? What do you think about this character? And, since we're already discussing Gael, there's one interesting thing about him I wanted to talk about. It was also noted by Panlishka in comments to one of my previous videos. During the boss fights Gael uses Executioner's great sword, while his red hood seems reminiscent to that of medieval executioners, which seems rather peculiar altogether. However, in Dark Souls 3 this hood, and its color, are said to signify that its wearer is a slave knight, and I'd say it may be compared to the thrall hoods, worn in Dark Souls 3 by slaves and criminals, while they actually seem to be similar to hoods worn by executioners. But that's due to the fact that thrall hoods are pretty much a reference to certain Berserk manga characters who were executioners. However, now it seems that the devs have made this parallel something like a rule. What seems to be related to medieval executioners in the real world, in Dark Souls is associated with slaves. And that would be it for this video, I guess. I hope it wasn't boring for you. And also I hope that maybe you'd like to watch other of my etymology, lore or cosplay videos. Also, for a long time already I've been thinking of finally starting a Tumblr blog, or something similar, where I'd be able to create a small etymology dictionary of Dark Souls names, or something like that. A list where I'd write down the names we discuss in the Behind the Souls Names videos, with short details on their possible meanings. Also, I guess I could post there some short notes, as since April I've had lots of random ideas that didn't make it into any of the videos, and in the end I guess I forgot some of them. If that would be interesting for you I could take some time to start one. And again, thanks for watching. I hope that the video was interesting for you.